The young lady despised that taciturn guard, so she betrothed me to him, sneering that an ugly freak matched with a mute was a perfect pair. I felt unworthy of him, but Xie Qi'an said I was his wife, and he ought to treat me well. Yet later, when the lady and I fell into the water together, Xie Qi'an instinctively saved the lady and shielded her as he left. He kept watch in the courtyard all night, completely forgetting about me. I thought it was his duty, until I stumbled upon the lady crying and throwing herself into Xie Qi'an's arms. She said she regretted it and asked him to take her away. On the day Xie Qi'an eloped with the lady, I was implicated and blamed by the Duke's household. I was beaten to death with clubs and thrown into a pile of corpses. But later, at the frontier, I heard that Xie Qi'an, now restored as the 19th prince, had frantically dug through the corpse heap until his hands were bloody, saying he was looking for his wife. A boat encounter with river bandits. Just now, the lady and I fell into the water together. Struggling, I saw Xie Qi'an, who had been fighting the bandits, suddenly grow panicked. He jumped into the water without a word and swam toward me. Relieved, I reached out my hand to him. "Qian, save." But Xie Qi'an acted as if he hadn't noticed me. He brushed past me quickly and swam straight toward the young lady, who had drifted farther away without warning. "Move aside," he probably thought I was in his way. The usually composed Xie Qi'an shoved me with almost rude force. My forehead slammed into the wooden beam on the water's surface, a sharp splinter cutting the corner of my eye. A haze of blood blurred my vision. Yet he still didn't notice me. I couldn't swim. The wound throbbed, and after struggling and choking on several mouthfuls of water, my consciousness began to fade. I vaguely heard the young lady say, "You should save your wife first. I can swim." But when I mustered my last ounce of strength to turn my head, all I saw was Xie Qi'an's back as he carried her away without a second thought. His movements were tense, as if cradling a treasure he'd barely reclaimed. Perhaps sensing my gaze, the young lady, who should have been weak, clung to Xie Qi'an's shoulder and suddenly lifted her eyes. Her look at me carried both pity and contempt. But that was nothing I thought. After all, Xie Qi'an was the young lady's bodyguard. It was only right that he saved her first. Xie Qi'an carried the young lady ashore. I kept thinking he must be coming to save me soon. I held on with sheer will, but until I lost consciousness. Xie Qi'an never once looked back. He shielded the young lady as they left the shore, while I was utterly ignored. Later, my mind hazy, I faintly sensed someone pulling me out of the water. Someone was tearing at my clothes, the river bandits. I heard their wild, lecherous laughter. But in the next second, it stopped. Uffed, what an ugly freak. Then I was flung hard onto the ground, my whole body racked with pain. Still, it was a good thing I was an ugly freak, I thought dazedly, before losing consciousness entirely. There was a hideous scar beside my left eye. People in the Duke's mansion whispered that I was extremely ugly. Yet I, with this ugly face, was betrothed to the handsome Xie Qi'an. He was the young lady's bodyguard, but she loathed him. She had told him to keep away more than once. Finally, she simply laughed and said, "I think you and a shoe are a perfect match, an ugly freak paired with a mute." It was a perfect match, and so the marriage between Xie Qi'an and me was settled. Actually, I was overjoyed in my heart. Xie Qi'an was highly skilled in martial arts and extremely handsome. Although he was a bit taciturn, he fulfilled all my fantasies about a future husband. I knew I didn't deserve Xie Qi'an, so I tried every way to be kinder to Xie Qi'an. At first, Xie Qi'an resisted all my goodwill, but the heart is made of flesh. Gradually, his attitude softened. Sometimes he would even exchange a few words with me. I once seriously told Xie Qi'an that if he didn't want this, I could beg the young lady to let us divorce. As a last resort, my own aunt had served the madam for many years, so she could put in a word. But Xie Qi'an just remained silent for a long while, and finally said in a hoarse voice, "No need, this is fine." After that, Xie Qi'an began to learn to protect me. He would remember the foods I liked, and would take care of me somewhat clumsily when I was sick. I had thought that after spending so much time together, Xie Qi'an treated me a little differently. I was secretly delighted for a good while back then. But now it seems like that wasn't right either. My aunt found me with the other guards from the mansion and brought me back to the Duke's residence. After that, I had a high fever that just wouldn't go down. But when I woke up, only Xiao Dai and my aunt were by my side. Xie Qi'an was still nowhere to be seen. My aunt sneered and said he was probably still keeping watch in the young lady's courtyard. That's when I found out. The young lady had come back and fallen into a mysterious coma. I heard Xie Qi'an panicked so much that he rounded up every doctor in the city to treat her, and because she didn't wake up for a long time, he refused to let those doctors leave. He stayed there in her courtyard all night, while you ran a fever the whole night. My aunt, who rarely showed it, actually sounded resentful. When Alan brought you back, your head was covered in blood. I wanted to get a doctor for you, but the maids in the young lady's courtyard stopped me. In the end, a little pharmacy apprentice had the courage to get you some medicine, but it still left a scar. A girl, and with a scar on her face. Maybe she felt she'd touched a sore spot, so my aunt stopped talking, but her anger hadn't faded. The eldest young lady's life is precious, but isn't yours precious too? Even if they sent a physician to him, you are still his lawful wife. I stopped my aunt's words, my eyes suddenly stinging badly. My chest felt tight too, but I smiled at my aunt and said softly, "The young lady is precious. It's only right to be thorough." Besides, Qi'an was originally the young lady's guard. He didn't do anything wrong. And you're still speaking up for him? I heard that when you fell into the water, he never even. My aunt's angry words halted abruptly. She realized she had misspoken and awkwardly changed the subject. I pretended not to hear and cheerfully comforted her instead. But after she left, I muttered to myself, people always forget something when they're anxious, and besides, the young lady was more important at that moment. After all, Xie Qi'an had just told me 2 days ago that once he saved enough silver to live independently, he would take me out of the mansion and we'd live a stable life. He also called me his wife. He said he should treat me well. I believed him and was overjoyed deep down because I felt Xie Qi'an finally had me in his heart. So this time, he surely didn't forget me on purpose. I had a fever for 2 days, but Xie Qi'an never came back because the young lady was frightened and needed someone to guard her. In my days, I had nightmares again, dreams of Xie Qi'an leaving me over and over. I always watched his back, until death suffocated me. Not until I felt a cool touch on my forehead did I barely open my eyes. "Qi'an, did I disturb you?" Xie Qi'an's voice was somewhat low. I shook my head. He pursed his lips and said, "I boiled some medicine. Drink it later, and you'll feel better." Okay. Xie Qi'an didn't light the lamp, so I didn't notice the expression on his face. He was silent for a long moment before speaking. I know you didn't mean to forget me before. I cut him off. Those river bandits were clearly targeting the young lady. You're skilled in martial arts. It was right for you to protect her and leave, I said, rambling on. As I spoke, my voice gradually faded, and I didn't know who I was trying to comfort. Xie Qi'an was taken aback, and though I couldn't see his expression, but he clearly felt his stiff body suddenly relax. However, it was ultimately my improper actions that harmed you. Sorry, Xie Qi'an said, awkwardly reaching out to pat my head. He comforted me again, saying the scar on my face could also be removed. He would find medicine for me later. Okay, I still replied cheerfully. My aunt said I was carefree, until heavy rain fell outside and thunder suddenly rumbled, making my face turn pale. Unconsciously, I grabbed Xie Qi'an's hand. I'm scared of thunder. Xie Qi'an's whole body stiffened instantly. He was still not used to being close to me, so he instinctively wanted to shake off my hand. But thinking of something, he abruptly stopped the action. Ashoo, you! Quick, come here. I recognized the voice as the maid Chunhong, my lady's personal attendant. She was talking to other guards, saying the lady was having nightmares and needed some guards with strong yang energy to protect the courtyard. Xie Qi'an's words were interrupted. He instinctively stood up, his tone unconsciously showing some anxiety. Wasn't she just fine? Why is she having nightmares again? I vaguely felt something was wrong. I tightened my grip on Xie Qi'an's hand, not wanting him to go. At the door, Chunhong had already found the guards. I forced myself to stay awake and suppress the tremor in my voice. Will you stay with me for a while? Besides, Chunhong had already found people. Actually, she didn't really need you either. The rumbling thunder brought back memories of those moments of dying despair. I desperately wanted Xie Qi'an to stay with me, but Xie Qi'an hesitated for only a moment. In the end, he pulled his hand away and gently comforted me. I'll have Xiaodai come keep you company. You'll feel better once you fall asleep. He didn't notice my fear and trembling, only hurried out the door, but paused the moment he opened it. A spark of hope flickered in my heart, and my eyes brightened. The young lady is about to get married. Nothing must go wrong before that. As the young lady's guard, I need to go check it out. Xie Qi'an paused and said in a deep voice, "Wait for me to return. Don't misunderstand. And don't go out spreading rumors." This time, I, who had always responded to every word Xie Qi'an said, could not utter a single syllable. I was biting my teeth, trembling, and faintly felt that these last words. It seemed that this was the real reason Xie Qi'an had returned. I fell into a coma, and when I woke up, those memories had become hazy. Besides, everyone said Xie Qi'an had never come back. So I thought it was just another nightmare of mine, where dreams are the opposite of reality. I told myself I was still waiting for Xie Qi'an to save up enough silver to take me away. After all, he was the husband I had married, the closest person to me in this world besides my aunt. I should trust him. Until I saw the young lady lashing him with her whip. There was no one else around, and Xie Qi'an just stood there in silence, letting the whip land on him. Instinctively, I thought the young lady was using the chance to punish him again. On this boat trip, we encountered river bandits. All the other guards had received some reward, except Xie Qi'an, who ended up with injuries. Remembering that he was already wounded, I wanted to plead for him when I saw the young lady suddenly drop the whip. Her voice was both angry and hurt. "Xie Qi'an, why are you too afraid to admit you like me now?" My footsteps halted, as if rooted to the spot, not daring to move forward. I thought I must be too busy recently, hallucinating such words. The young lady and Xie Qi'an? How could that be? But Xie Qi'an's body suddenly stiffened, his lips tightly pressed together. The emotions in his eyes were so complex, I dared not look deeper. "Fin." The young lady laughed. She suddenly pulled out her hairpin and stabbed viciously toward her own arm, but Xie Qi'an was faster. The hairpin ended up piercing his palm. Blood everywhere. His eyes were reddened, and he pleaded with cautious tenderness, "Don't hurt yourself." Looking into the young lady's eyes, I saw a tenderness I had never seen before. Even if you don't admit it, so what? The usually aloof young lady was rarely vulnerable. She lifted her chin slightly, her tone fierce. "You listened to me and married that ugly monster, then later didn't want a divorce. It's because her voice is somewhat similar to mine, isn't it? Xie Qi'an, do you dare admit that when you were intimate with her, in the dark without seeing her face, only hearing her voice, you never treated her as my substitute?" I suddenly raised my head. In disbelief, my limbs turned ice cold. I suddenly recalled that during the few intimate moments after our marriage, Xie Qi'an would rarely show a hint of tenderness, softly coaxing me, "A shoe. I want to hear your voice," but I still stared fixedly at Xie Qi'an, a voice inside me desperately longing for him to deny it. Xie Qi'an did not speak immediately. He looked as if his thoughts had been exposed, his face instantly pale as a ghost, utterly disheveled. Finally, he turned his head away and said in a hoarse voice, "I'm married," telling the young lady. Yet it sounded more like he was telling himself. "Yes, you're married, and it was I who forced you to marry her," the young lady said with a bitter smile. Then she threw away the hairpin and, crying, threw herself at Xie Qi'an. Xie Qi'an instinctively shielded her, then hastily hid his injured hand behind his back, not daring to touch, as if afraid his blood would stain her. "But Xie Qi'an, I regret it," the young lady said, clutching his clothes tightly, crying like a pear blossom in the rain. "Only now do I realize that I actually liked you. It's just that I was too proud before, thinking you weren't good enough for me, so I tried every means to push you away. But when you truly like someone, how can you even care about whether you're worthy? Xie Qi'an, I don't want to marry that man, he's a pervert. If I marry him, I'll die. I only want to marry you. Take me away, okay?" Xie Qi'an's arms around the young lady stiffened for a moment. He seemed too shocked to speak, his eyes cast down as he pondered something. But after a long while, I heard Xie Qi'an's voice again. Hoarse and low, "Okay." Xie Qi'an agreed. I don't know how I returned to the room. The pastries I had brought for him had already gone cold. I quietly looked around, suddenly realizing how few things here belonged to Xie Qi'an. So few that if one day he didn't want to stay, he could just leave alone. Then why did he make me that promise? Out of pity? I sat by the table, dazed and lost in thought, not even knowing when Xie Qi'an came back. He returned covered in injuries again, fresh wounds atop old ones. Seeing me look at him, he instinctively explained, "It's my fault for failing to protect you, miss, causing you to be hurt."
Dankfa.
I nodded. Perhaps my unusual coldness made Xie Qi'an uncomfortable, or maybe it was due to guilt. He hesitated for a moment and softened his tone. "Sorry to trouble you again." Xie Qi'an disliked being touched by others. Even though I was married to him, I rarely got to touch him. But the young lady could leave her mark on him anytime, anywhere. "Does it hurt?" I asked softly, looking at the dense scars on Xie Qi'an's back. He always got hurt because of her. A shoe. Xie Qi'an did not answer my question. He turned his head to look at me, his handsome face full of seriousness. "We'll leave in a while." My hand, which was applying medicine for him, paused. There was no joy from hearing these words for the first time, only a nameless unease welling up in my heart. The instinctive question, "What about the young lady?" was forcibly suppressed. Perhaps seeing that I didn't respond for a long time, Xie Qi'an looked at me with confusion. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." I shook my head, then suddenly spoke again, "That day when I was injured and had a fever. My aunt said she couldn't find a doctor." As soon as she finished speaking, the muscles under my hand suddenly tensed. I wanted to demand an answer from Xie Qi'an. "Should I also said she had gone to look for you?" I stared into Xie Qi'an's eyes, stubbornly asking, "Why didn't you come back with her, even if just to see me?" How could he not know that I was injured? I went to beg him, saying that just having a doctor come take a look would be enough, but Xie Qi'an insisted on waiting for the young lady to wake up. He clearly never cared about me. Xiaoti's words from that day echoed in my ears again. I had deliberately forgotten them, but I believed in Xie Qi'an, believed that it was just his duty, believed that his protecting the young lady was only because she was his mistress. But now every word grated on my ears. Some trivial details that should have been forgotten suddenly came back to me. For example, in his free time, Xie Qi'an would often stare blankly toward the southwest. That was the direction of the young lady's courtyard. Another example, I once accidentally saw a red beaded hairpin at Xie Qi'an's place. I thought it was meant for me, but when I gleefully tried it on, Xie Qi'an flew into a rage. He carefully put the hairpin away, then paused slightly when he turned and saw me. "Sorry." Xie Qi'an apologized in a low voice, explaining that this belonged to someone else. I nodded, feeling a bit guilty inside, but this hairpin that Xie Qi'an valued so much still broke, on the second day after the young lady's birthday. However, Xie Qi'an was injured at that time. I was worried about him, so I didn't bring it up. Later, I simply forgot. Now that I remembered again, Xie Qi'an quickly returned to normal. He looked away. The young lady was frightened. Those river bandits came from unknown origins. She needs someone guarding her at all times. Lord Zhou doesn't trust anyone else either. I actually came back to see you." Xie Qi'an's voice grew softer, but he didn't mention the physician at all. I didn't say anything, just quietly looked at him, watching him unconsciously clench his fists, his expression bearing a rare hint of panic. At that time, Xie Qi'an pressed his lips tightly. "A Shu, this was my fault." A chill gradually spread in my heart. I withdrew my gaze and forced a faint smile. "It has nothing to do with you. The young lady is a precious one. It's only natural for you to be cautious. I'm just a servant, but not quite like that either." I don't know why, but Xie Qi'an suddenly interrupted me. His voice was urgent, and his eyes inexplicably reddened. Yet when he saw my puzzled look, he stopped speaking, his gaze falling on the scar beside my face. Xie Qi'an turned around. He reached out, his movements stiff and unfamiliar, touching the scar on my face. He bit his lip and softly made a promise to me. "Ah Shu is my wife. I will remove the scar from your face, and I will treat you very, very well." Xie Qi'an had said this many times. After every time we were intimate, when he was saving up silver to take me away. Now that I think about it, it was more of an emphasis and a reminder than a promise. I turned my head away to avoid his gaze, speaking casually. "It doesn't matter. I'm already used to it, Ah Shu." But Xie Qi'an frowned. Ignoring that his movements might pull at his wound, he instinctively grabbed my hand. Staring into my eyes, he said word by word, "I will cure the scar on your face. We'll leave here after a while." There was obvious urgency in his eyes, and he gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. I looked at Xie Qi'an for a long time. Under his increasingly impatient gaze, I smiled at Xie Qi'an, my tones soothing as before. "All right. So Xie Qi'an breathed a sigh of relief. But Xie Qi'an still broke his promise. 2 days before the wedding, he eloped with the eldest daughter of the Duke's mansion. So I was implicated and blamed by the Duke's mansion. The club was raised high and finally slammed down heavily on me. It hurt. My whole body ached terribly. My aunt went to plead for me. She also tried to throw herself on me to shield me, but was stopped. She cried out, "Tell them where Xie Qi'an is, Ashu. Even if Xie Qi'an is perfect in every way, are you going to abandon even your aunt for him now?" I forced a faint smile at my aunt, thinking that I actually wanted to tell them where Xie Qi'an was, but I didn't know. I didn't even know when he left. But no one believed me. They thought I was trying to protect Xie Qi'an. I also wanted to say that Xie Qi'an was actually far from perfect. It was just that he had once saved my life, just that he had once taught those who mocked and insulted me a lesson and told me, "Ashu is not ugly, they're the ugly ones." But now I have repaid it all. In the bone-piercing pain, I suddenly remembered that this was not the first time Xie Qi'an had abandoned me. It turned out that back then, it was not just a nightmare for my fever. Only this time, I couldn't even see Xie Qi'an's back. I was beaten until I was covered in blood. The people of the Duke's mansion thought I was Xie Qi'an's wife and believed he would not be heartless enough to watch his own wife suffer such torture. But they were wrong yet again. Even when I was beaten to the point of barely breathing, Xie Qi'an never showed his face. Finally, when I stopped breathing altogether, the Duke of Zhou coldly ordered me to be thrown into a pile of corpses. The stench of rotting bodies mixed with the smell of blood. When the eerie cries of birds sounded, I paused for a moment, then endured the pain all over my body and crawled out of that pile of corpses. But at least I survived.
See?
I stopped trusting Xie Qi'an and instead found a way to live. Crawled out. From now on, I don't owe Xie Qi'an anything. I tugged at the corner of my mouth, thinking, but my whole body ached terribly. I only had time to see a person before I fainted from pain. When I woke up again, I was in a carriage. Alin, who had always been praised as honest and simple by my aunt and Xiao Dai, now had a cold face and swiftly killed the bandits blocking the road. Sensing that I had woken up, he said without turning his head, "I burned down your house. Nothing was left behind." I nodded. The valuable items had long been taken by me, including the silver that Xie Qi'an had saved up. Alin paused and said, "Xie Qi'an has gone back as the 19th prince. In the palace coup that year, the most favored 19th prince was kidnapped by bandits and disappeared without a trace. Alin had told me that Xie Qi'an was that 19th prince. Now that he has returned to being that lofty prince, he probably won't mind that I took the silver he had saved for so many years." I said comfortingly, thinking that Miss Zhou was truly fortunate. Alin, he dug through the pile of corpses for a long time, his hands covered in blood, saying he wanted to find you. I was shocked. Could it be that he knew I had taken his silver? But I wasn't in the pile of corpses. Alin, I found another body to take your place. Xie Qi'an believed it, and so did the court officials. Just as I hadn't known before that Xie Qi'an was the 19th prince, Xie Qi'an probably never imagined that I was the remnant of the previous dynasty that the court had been searching for. Although I was just an unloved princess confined to the cold palace, Alin also said that he ignored everyone's attempts to stop him and carried that corpse back, saying that you were his wife. He also said that he had promised to take you away. This time, I was silent for a long while. After a moment, I smiled and shook my legs, then sighed. But Ashu is dead. Only after a child is dead do you think of feeding it. What kind of nonsense is that? Alin fell silent. From Xie Qi'an's perspective, Xie Qi'an rushed back on the 4th day. He should have come back earlier to take Ashu away. But Zhou Tsongxue suddenly fell ill and begged him to stay with her a little longer. Xie Qi'an hesitated, but at the moment Zhou Tsongxue cried and asked, "Didn't you promise to always protect me?" Xie Qi'an suddenly recalled that rainy night years ago, when the lofty young lady of the Duke's mansion gave a life-saving bun to a little beggar and magnanimously said that if he managed to survive, she would give him a way out. And so the little beggar was taken away, eventually becoming Zhou Tsongxue's guard. Until not long ago, he regained his memories and learned his true identity. Zhou Tsongxue looked up at him slightly, her delicate face streaked with tears. Her eyes, which had never held him before, now focused solely on him. She asked with rare vulnerability, "Are you regretting taking me away?" Her voice was trembling. This was exactly the scene Xie Qi'an had always wanted to see. He should have been happy. Will you stay with me for a while? But for some reason, Xie Qi'an suddenly thought of Ashu. When Ashu was sick, she also hoped he would stay with her. But Ashu was sensible. She wouldn't throw a tantrum like Zhou Zongxue did whenever she sensed he might leave. Even when sick, she was exceptionally cautious, afraid of causing trouble for others. Xie Qi'an, seeing that he hadn't replied for a long time, heard Zhou Zongxue's voice grow louder with a hint of anger. So Xie Qi'an absent-mindedly thought again. When he left back then, Ashu must have been angry too, but she had a good temper and never held it against him. It dawned on Xie Qi'an that he both liked and disliked her not holding grudges. He suddenly wanted to test just how far good-natured Ashu could go without taking offense, so he agreed to Zhou Zongxue's request and stayed 2 more days. Yet he couldn't help wanting to go back, and each day he regretted it more. All the way, Xie Qi'an was thinking about how to explain to Ashu later, and also thinking, would Ashu be afraid if she knew he was the 19th prince? After all, she had once said she only wanted a simple and ordinary life. But Ashu was his wife, destined not to live such a life. Xie Qi'an thought the whole way. He also thought no matter what, considering his birthday was coming soon, Ashu would surely leave with him. But he never expected that he wouldn't even get a chance to explain. The room he once lived in had turned to ashes, and his Ashu had long been beaten to death by a mob, thrown into a pile of corpses. Xie Qi'an didn't look at the people who were panicking and kneeling all over the ground, and let Ashu's aunt curse him bitterly. It took him a long time before he seemed to suddenly come to his senses. He dug for a long time in that pile of corpses, his hands bleeding profusely, until he finally found his Ashu in a corner. Wild dogs often roamed there. Ashu's face was bitten beyond recognition, and her body was mutilated. Xie Qi'an didn't believe it, but everyone said this was Ashu. They said Ashu was wearing these clothes that day, and that they had watched her breathe her last. Xie Qi'an still refused to believe until a green jade hairpin fell from the corpse's clenched hand. It fell to the ground and broke into several pieces. Xie Qi'an's whole body went rigid. That was the first gift he had given Ashu, but Ashu had never worn it. She merely treasured it, hiding it away like a precious thing, then said jokingly that she would protect that hairpin until her death. But Ashu died. Ashu. The hairpin broke. Xie Qi'an carefully held the body, then clung to it as if possessed, murmuring softly, "You broke your promise." His subordinates came to advise him. Xie Qi'an's face showed neither joy nor anger. "I ordered you to protect her," he said. The subordinate's expression stiffened. Finally, one of them gritted his teeth and spoke up. "Your Highness, she was just a peasant girl." Everyone felt that Ashu was not worthy of the 19th prince. Now the situation was critical. Several princes were watching you closely. You absolutely cannot ruin your previous great plans because of her. Everyone urged him to consider the bigger picture. Xie Qi'an understood all of this, so he simply took Ashu back and ordered an ice coffin to be made. Apart from that, he showed no difference from his usual self. On the way back, Xie Qi'an encountered the earlier river bandits drinking. From these river bandits, Xie Qi'an learned that Zhou Zongxue's previous fall into the water was no accident. She had bribed these bandits, wanting Ashu to die in that mishap. But without tarnishing her reputation, she even wanted Ashu to be dishonored, but that was just an ugly monster. The drunken river bandit spat and laughed loudly. Who would fancy an ugly? Before he could finish, Xie Qi'an ran him through with a sword. "Handle it." Xie Qi'an was expressionless. Everyone thought he was protecting the young lady of the Duke's manor. Immediately, a subordinate sighed in relief, feeling fortunate. "I knew that woman meant nothing to His Highness." Xie Qi'an heard it. He only lowered his eyes and continued wiping his sword. The wound on his hand had been treated with the best medicine, and now it was almost healed, just like a person had died. Afterwards, there would be better people. That position would always have someone wanting to occupy it. Ashu indeed meant nothing, Xie Qi'an thought, but his eyes suddenly darkened, like surging dark clouds, unseen by anyone. I ran an inn beyond the Great Wall. The inn had a constant flow of guests, and I always heard some interesting tales. For example, the young lady of the Duke's manor hadn't run away from marriage back then, but encountered bandits while going to a temple to pray for her fiancé. Although not seriously harmed, she was frightened, and that affected the wedding date. For example, The emperor's most beloved 19th prince became a target of many princes after his return, yet it took him only 4 years to ascend to that position. Another instance is that the court recently revoked the pursuit of remnants of the previous dynasty, reportedly a new policy implemented by the new emperor. But I didn't care about any of that. Instead, I asked, "Where is Aunt?" I looked behind Aylin but didn't see the person I wanted to see. My eyes dimmed instantly. I murmured, "Is Aunt still angry with me?" "Aunt Song isn't angry," comforted Xiaodai, who had been brought back by Aylin. "She said it's good that you're alive. The master's family treats her kindly, so she won't come to burden you, and it saves her from suffering. Aunt Song also said she was waiting for you, this ungrateful little brat, to come tell her you're alive and well. She just didn't expect that wait to last 4 years." That sentence made me both cry and laugh. Back then, the court officials were about to uncover my identity, so I took the opportunity to fake my death using the incident between Xie Qi'an and Zhou Congxue. But I can't tell Aunt any of this, let alone implicate her. Only now that I am safe, I dared to ask Alin to go to the capital to find my aunt. Alin was sent by those from the former dynasty to find me, but I managed to turn him to my side. After all, I never thought that I, a princess from the cold palace, could bear the burden of restoring the kingdom. Besides, the current emperor is quite good, and Alin also has no ambition. So we took the money and directly fled to the frontier. Fortunately, this worry is settled. Alin said he needs to return to the capital the day after tomorrow and told me to prepare whatever I want to say or bring as soon as possible. I agreed, and remembering that I had just gotten a ginseng from a Western merchant a couple of days ago, I hurried home to fetch it. But as soon as I opened the courtyard gate, I keenly sensed something wrong. Just as I was about to turn and leave, my vision suddenly went dark. My body was trapped between the courtyard gate and that person's body. Fingertips, cold, carefully touched my cheek. Restrained and controlled, rapid breaths fell by my ear. When he spoke, the voice was strangely familiar, trembling faintly. "Ashu, I found you." My body suddenly stiffened. I didn't expect Xie Qi'an to come looking for me, let alone find me so quickly. He covered my eyes yet held me tightly. His whole body was trembling violently as he called my name over and over. "Ashu, Ashu." At this moment, he seemed like a lovesick fool. I grew impatient and reached out to push him. "Please." The words suddenly caught in my throat. The force I used was clearly not much, but Xie Qi'an, a martial artist, was easily pushed away by me. He even staggered weakly several steps before being steadied by someone. I stared at him in shock, frowning. "What are you crying about?" Large tears rolled down his cheeks. Xie Qi'an looked at me, his eyes red. His lips quivered, looking wronged and helpless. "Wife, you're hurting me." Who is this person?" "Miss Ashu." Finally, Xie Qi'an's subordinate coughed lightly and explained somewhat awkwardly. "His Majesty is poisoned and lost his memory, or rather, lost his wits. Now, Xie Qi'an remembers nothing except that I am his wife and that he must find his wife. He remembers nothing else, and he claims he was set up by some malicious person on the way to find me. So, I was both amused and angered, watching these people warily. I have no relationship with your emperor. His being poisoned and amnesiac has nothing to do with me either. To put it bluntly, I suffered plenty because of Xie Qi'an back then. Aren't you afraid I'll take this chance to harm him? I wouldn't dare kill him. After all, he is the current emperor, but I always have ways to torment a fool who clings to me." Xie Qi'an's subordinates instantly turned pale. Someone shouted, "How dare you?" "Do you know?" But before he could finish, Xie Qi'an kicked him away. He stood firmly in front of me, his expression dark and fierce. "Don't you dare yell at my wife," he said, with the ruthlessness of a ruler. But then the next second, he turned to look at me, his eyes curving into crescents. "Wife, I'll protect you." This man, having lost his wits, had even changed completely in temperament. I said nothing. She only distanced herself coldly from Xie Qi'an, and his expression instantly fell into desolation. Miss Ashu, the leader-like person, sighed, but his attitude was firm. "When His Majesty is conscious, he said you would be responsible for taking care of him. We are merely following orders. However, Miss Ashu, please think twice before acting. After all, His Majesty's poisoning is only temporary, and the others secretly protecting His Majesty are far less easy to negotiate with than us." I understood the threat in his tone, and anger burned within me again and again. In the end, I suppressed it. I looked coldly at Xie Qi'an, who was gradually trying to edge closer to me, frowning in annoyance.
Phoenix.
So Xie Qi'an ended up staying at my inn. To avoid stirring up more trouble, his subordinates gave him a different face. I didn't know how many people were secretly protecting him. I only warned Alin and Xiao Dai to keep their distance. Xiao Dai didn't seem to mind, but Alin might have guessed something. I stopped her from saying more. Xie Qi'an was always by my side. He didn't do much, just quietly watched me, as if that alone was enough to satisfy him. Sometimes he would even rush to do chores for me, but he was always clumsy. Every time he messed up, he would look at me with a bewildered expression. He would mumble, "A shoe, I'll compensate you." But I ignored him. Luckily, he didn't cause me any other trouble, so I just pretended he wasn't there. Where did this little tale come from? Always following you. Lu Qian, the owner of the bamboo pine pavilion, glanced at Xie Qi'an and clicked his tongue. He's really ugly. The frontier has such open customs. Although the bamboo pine pavilion was nominally a tea house, most of its patrons were women. I had recently collaborated with Lu Qian on a batch of rouge and powder, and she added, "Do you need me to chase him away?" As she spoke, Lu Qian slightly bent down and leaned closer to me. Her upturned fox eyes were filled with a hint of playful smile. "For the sake of you being my regular customer," she deliberately drew out the ending note, with a hint of lingering affection. I sighed helplessly. "Boss Lu, you get lost." Before I could finish my sentence, Lu Qian was yanked away roughly. Her already loose clothing was now wide open, revealing a large expanse of fair chest. Xie Qi'an immediately blocked my view, his face dark. "Shameless. You are truly unreasonable," I said. Lu Qian slowly straightened his clothes, his face turning cold. "I am speaking to your master." "Since when does a servant interrupt?" "Boss Shu, you are too kind. Better to hand this person over to me for some proper discipline." Xie Qi'an pursed his lips. A murderous look flickered in his eyes, but I interrupted impatiently. "Xie Qi'an, you get out." Xie Qi'an seemed startled. He turned his head to look at me in disbelief, a look of sudden grievance spreading across his face. He had just started to say, "wife," when I glared at him in warning, cutting him off. I said coldly, "Don't force me to kick you out." Ironically, in previous years I had desperately longed for Xie Qi'an to call me wife, but he never did. Now that I no longer care, he comes up to me, calling me wife at every turn. Xie Qi'an lowered his eyes slightly. When he looked up again, he had calmed down. "Okay," he smiled at me, suppressing the murderous look in his eyes once more. His smile was gentle and obedient. "I'll wait outside for a shoe." I ignored him. Then Lu Qian clicked his tongue and directly denounced his crimes in public. "A shoe, your subordinate is glaring at me." He glares so fiercely, as if he's about to rush over and kill me any second. "A shoe, I'm so scared." Xie Qian's body tensed, and then he quickened his pace to leave. I lowered my gaze to Lu Qian, who was practically trying to burrow into my arms, and smiled slightly. "You've damaged my reputation. Give me another 10% profit." Lu Qian instantly turned serious. "That won't do. That man Lu Qian is a sly old fox. I'm still too inexperienced. But since he's willing to guide me, I'll follow and learn. As for compensation, debts can always be settled eventually." Although Lu Qian keeps saying I could just pay with my person, most of the time I just laugh it off, not taking it to heart. The scar on my face still remains. I was initially afraid it might reveal my identity, but later I found that this ugly appearance actually brought me rare peace in this border region. When I went out, I didn't see Xie Qi'an, but there were always people protecting him, so I didn't bother with it. Not until I was fast asleep in the dead of night. I vaguely sensed someone beside me. When I struggled to open my eyes and saw the scene before me, my pupils contracted. "Wife," Xie Qi'an tilted his head and smiled at me, as if completely unaware of what he was doing, yet now his robes were half open, the loose undergarment hanging slack on his shoulders, with a faint glimpse of a golden chain trailing down from his collarbone to his chest. It disappeared further down, and with the slightest movement, a faint jingling of bells could be heard. I had seen this kind of appearance before at Lu Qian's bamboo and pine pavilion, and Lu Qian had dressed up like this a few times as well. But I only thought he was trying to gain something by this method, and never paid any attention. Xie Qi'an, dressed like this, still frowned innocently and looked at me with a pitiful expression. "Wife, it's uncomfortable." But suddenly I calmed down. I quietly watched Xie Qi'an, catching a hint of panic he unconsciously revealed. But he quickly concealed it. Mother. A shoe. Xie Qi'an changed his address quickly, as if he had done something wrong, his voice dropping considerably. I thought you liked this. His attitude was cautious, as if afraid I would get angry, turning the tables again. Before, I was always the one looking after Xie Qi'an's feelings, but now I couldn't describe how I felt, only that there was a lump in my chest that I couldn't swallow or spit out. But that pent-up anger was soon replaced by a surge of rage. I tugged at the corner of my mouth. You don't have to do this, Ashu. Xie Qi'an called me anxiously. In the past, did I do something terrible, making you so angry that you don't even plan to forgive me? As he spoke the last part, his voice trembled. His voice was shaking. The hem of my clothes was gently tugged. Xie Qi'an's voice was almost pleading. Ashu, I know I was wrong. Can you give me a chance? His voice carried a faint note of grievance. I quietly pulled my clothes free and smiled at him. In the same soothing tone as before, I said, Sure. A faint light flickered in Xie Qi'an's eyes. After that day, I treated Xie Qi'an somewhat better. At least I no longer wore a cold face like I had in previous days. Alin noticed the shift in my attitude and frowned as he asked, Are you planning to forgive him? I lowered my head to fiddle with the abacus, not answering directly, but instead asking him, On this trip back to the capital, do you know how that eldest miss of the Duke's estate is doing now? Alin kept a straight face, not intending to answer. Seeing that I was doing poorly, he finally spoke in a gruff tone. After the Duke's mansion fell into decline, she still married Prince Zhao. But Prince Zhao was rough in his ways and had some peculiar preferences in the bedroom. Just a few days after the marriage, Zhou Zongxue was crying and clamoring to go back. But no one paid her any mind. Later, she finally found a chance to escape, but then she was kidnapped by bandits for several days. By the time she returned, her chastity had been violated. That face of hers was also ruined. It looked like... Alin suddenly stopped mid-sentence. I didn't mind his pause and only asked, Did Prince Zhao take her back? Alin grunted in acknowledgement, his face extremely sullen. He did manage to earn a reputation for deep affection among women. But do you think Prince Zhao is that magnanimous? I asked again. Alin fell silent. I smiled and continued fiddling with the abacus. To be honest, Xie Qi'an and I are still husband and wife, but he now. Ashu, Xie Qi'an's voice suddenly rang out, interrupting Alin's words. He walked toward me, smoothly squeezing Alin aside, and presented the item in his hand to me like an offering. Does Ashu like it? These days, Xie Qi'an has been finding all sorts of ways to send me gifts. I took the red jade earrings, a trace of surprise flashing in my eyes. I like them. Then can I put them on for Ashu? Xie Qi'an asked cautiously. I paused, then smiled at him. Sure. Xie Qi'an pursed his lips. He leaned down to put the earrings on me, his movements gentle yet trembling. And Alin's words were never finished. Xie Qi'an's poison remained undetoxified, and his subordinates anxiously searched everywhere for renowned doctors and experts. Yet this master wasn't the least bit anxious. Soon it would be Xie Qi'an's birthday. I told Xie Qi'an that I hoped there wouldn't be too many others disturbing us on his birthday. I want to celebrate your birthday properly. Xie Qi'an agreed to my request almost without hesitation. His eyes curved as he said softly, Whatever Ashu wants. I'll agree to it. So on Xie Qi'an's birthday, he kept very few secret guards by his side. I led Xie Qi'an through the busiest long street in the border town, telling him about things that had happened to me here. Xie Qi'an listened very attentively, but when he heard about my humiliation, he couldn't help but grab my hand emotionally, feeling both distressed and guilty, and he assured me, I will treat Ashu very well. It's all in the past. I looked at the unusually lively scene ahead and chuckled softly. When we reached the end of the long street, everything will pass. Xie Qi'an didn't notice anything. He was still earnestly picking out gifts for me until the sound of urgent horse hooves rang out. From afar came the sound of clashing weapons, and the faint smell of blood permeated the air. I withdrew my hand and took a few steps back under Xie Qi'an's shocked gaze. I tilted my head and smiled at him. Playing the fool is actually quite hard. Xie Qi'an, you'd be better off going back to being the emperor. Xie Qi'an was not a soft-hearted person. Especially during the struggle for the throne, his several elder brothers showed him no mercy. So after Xie Qi'an ascended, he executed some and demoted others. The few remaining princes appeared respectful on the surface, but harbored their own agendas. Running Hunan has this advantage. People from all walks of life often come and go. With the news came more details. Since Lu Qian was the third prince's man, I gave him Xie Qian's personal jade pendant. Xie Qian stared at me blankly. The smile on his face gradually faded, and he returned to his former demeanor, but his eyes were burning red. His Adam's apple bobbed. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. A Shu had already sensed it that night. It wasn't a question. I didn't answer, so Xie Qian laughed softly. You tricked me again. 4 years ago, you tricked me into thinking you were dead, and now 4 years later, you still want to trick me. His rising voice suddenly stopped. Xie Qian raised his hand to cover his eyes and coughed lowly. Every word seemed to bleed. A Shu, you've never forgiven me. Now, you can't even be bothered to deceive me anymore. Should I forgive you? I asked him seriously. When I fell into the water, you abandoned me without a care. That day, I nearly drowned. I was almost violated. You knew I was injured and burning with fever, yet you still let those maids block the doctor from seeing me. Later, you said you would take me away. But he eloped with Zhou Congxue, never thinking about what would become of me left behind. Xie Qian, I once trusted you completely, yet when I trusted you, I found myself in danger at every turn. But after I stopped trusting you, I survived. Xie Qian was left speechless, choking on my words. Suddenly, he covered his mouth and coughed. Unable to suppress the heavy cough, traces of blood clung to the corner of his mouth, yet he still stared at me intently and reached out his hand toward me. His tone gentle, he said, A Shu, we are still husband and wife. Come back with me. The position of Empress has always been kept for you. If you're still angry, you can hit me or scold me. I'll take it all. But a Shu, you should at least come home and see. Long ago, I had always longed for a home. Xie Qian had also promised to take me away, but I no longer believed him. So I shook my head. You deceived me before, but I used the elopement to fake my death and escape. Let's call it even. But it's not that simple. Someone thrust a sword at Xie Qian. He let the sword pierce his body, then twisted and snapped the man's neck. His demeanor remained mild, but his dark eyes, fixed on me, were heavy. Shu, I owe you a lot. You should seek retribution for me. A chill ran through me, and I pursed my lips. I thought to myself that I should have known Xie Qian had changed a lot. Shu. Xie Qian tried to walk toward me, but after only 2 steps, his expression suddenly turned extremely grim. I had poisoned Xie Qian. I turned to look at the figure behind him, and suddenly laughed. Xie Qian, you see, you never trusted me either. Xie Qian's men had arrived. The third prince was doomed to lose. This was actually within expectations, but the one thing I never expected was that the third prince would threaten me with Lu Qian. Little lady, his eyes were filled with ruthlessness. If you want to save this little lover of yours, kill him now. Another forced choice. Lu Qian had always been a vain old fox, but now he looked utterly disheveled. He struggled to open his eyes and look at me, let out a soft scoff, then closed them again. He seemed to hold no expectations at all. Xie Qian also watched me quietly. The people around seemed ready to charge forward, but he held them back. He was waiting for my reaction, but what was there to expect? I picked up the dagger at my feet and walked towards Xie Qian. Then I steadily drove the dagger into his chest, not far from his heart. Xie Qian seemed to be in extreme pain, so much so that he arched his back, shrouded in an inescapable stillness. Yet he still fixed his gaze on me, only whispering softly, A Shu, today is my birthday. Are you really going to hurt me for someone else? Shu girl, what foolishness are you up to? Lu Qian scolded. I ignored him, simply telling Xie Qian with utter seriousness, I have no way back. Xie Qian, I will not bear your children. That is a breach of virtue. I have been intimate with other men. That is a breach of the clan's honor. I am jealous of the women by your side. That is a breach of family harmony. You should divorce me. Now I have committed. Shut up. Xie Qian suddenly roared, cutting off my words. Veins bulged on his forehead. I told you to shut up. But I calmly continued, I have committed both husband murder and regicide, and I am a remnant of the previous dynasty. You should kill me. I was forcing myself, and even more so, forcing Xie Qian. The third prince was killed, and Lu Qi'an was rescued, but the surroundings remained dead silent. Are you so unwilling to return with me? Xie Qi'an asked, his eyes bloodshot. I didn't answer, only said, I suddenly remembered something. Years ago, a little beggar pulled me to safety when I was being hunted, saving my life. The scar on my face came from that time. Later, I carried him, burning with fever, out of a rundown temple and begged from door to door for someone to save him. But that little beggar seemed to remember only the noble young lady who once gave him a steamed bun. Xie Qi'an's body stiffened sharply. Yet now, I feel that maybe the little beggar didn't forget everything after all. I laughed again. Xie Qi'an, your love comes with conditions. I don't need it. That's not true, he stammered, panicking, trying to explain. But I cut him off. You ask why I'm unwilling to return with you? Then let me ask you this. Back when you remembered you were the 19th prince, did you ever think of still keeping me as your lawful wife? Xie Qi'an opened his mouth, but remained silent. I know Xie Qi'an too well. He wouldn't, and others wouldn't allow it either. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been beaten to death by the Duke's estate. You don't love me, so I said, word by word, you're just used to my unconditional devotion. And you can't accept that someone you consider lowly abandoned you first. These words are a gamble betting on whether I can keep my life. The inn, I've already left it in the hands of Alin and Xiaodai. My aunt will have someone to look after her. All I have left is this life. A dead silence. After a long while, Xie Qi'an began coughing violently again. He coughed painfully, but merely wiped the blood from his lips with indifference. Then a warmth covered the back of my hand. Xie Qi'an had taken my hand. He pushed the dagger in deeper. You have not killed your husband or your emperor. Xie Qi'an was in such agony that every word was a struggle, yet he still made sure everyone nearby heard clearly. It was I, the emperor, who ordered you to do this. He spoke with imperial authority, yet his eyes were red, the grief and desolation in his gaze suffocating. Xie Qi'an left. Before leaving, he said he would wait for me to come back anytime. I ignored him, and I don't know what Xie Qi'an did. Luckily, no one bothered me. I remained a small innkeeper at the border, happily earning money and listening to the gossip of all sorts of people passing by. Occasionally, I would do business with Lu Qi'an and also tease the children born to Alin and Xiaodai. Later, I heard that Xie Qi'an couldn't withstand the pressure and still made someone empress. Once such a thing happens, there's always a second time. It's perfectly normal. But it had little to do with me anymore. After all, I was just an innkeeper who wanted to earn money.